Alrighty everybody, welcome back to Ghoster Coasters, and today we're taking a trip to the Lake Erie Peninsula known as Cedar Point, home to 18 roller coasters if you count Pipe Scream, and known for pushing the boundaries on the extraordinary and breaking records, basically earning the Thrill Capital title by being the company who pushed innovation in the amusement industry. Today, we want to break down the records Cedar Point broke over the decades and see how many coasters really broke records at the park. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join our spooky community today, and a huge shout out goes out to all of our channel members and Coaster Ghost and producers for being the best coaster community out there. And who would have thought we're racing towards 3,000 subscribers in our spooky community. Now, let's get to the record-breaking action at Cedar Point.
Now, we decided to just kind of do the industry record breakers here, not North America or specific to any areas. If it broke a record at opening, we're going to talk about it. And that means even though Blue Streak was once the tallest coaster in the park when it was built, and it is the longest operating coaster at the park, it still won't be mentioned. Wait, you get the point, right? So, this takes us to our first record breaker and an iconic piece of Cedar Point history as it flips guests over the midway. We're going to 1976 and the opening of Corkscrew.
Taking the inversion record from Corkscrew at Knott's Berry Farm, now located at Silverwood Theme Park, Cedar Point unveiled the new Corkscrew coaster on May 15, 1976, opening as the first roller coaster with 3 inversions. Now, hitting the age of iconic and classic status at the park, it really is fun to see just how far we've come from aero corkscrews to now. But one thing I do wonder is when coasters stopped interacting with the midways. And yes, we know, phones, all that, but really, corkscrews over the midway are one of the coolest elements on a coaster, and I wish we saw more of that interaction at parks in safer ways.
On to a legendary coaster, and many people's first big coaster, and a personal favorite at Ghoster Coasters, the legendary Gemini, designed by none other than Ron Toomer and Aerodynamics, opened on June 17, 1978 to rave reviews and a ton of ridership per hour, boasting a racing theme and tons of guest interactions on the course. Cedar Point had a real winner on their hands with Gemini, and over the years, the coaster has remained a fun, popular ride to clap hands on in corners and spend time with the family. But what records did it break upon opening? When it debuted, Gemini held the record for tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world, along with the steepest drop on a roller coaster hill. Being a hybrid coaster and using wood for the supports and steel for the tracks, this ride has stood the test of time and still remains a family classic. Although time has passed this once legendary coaster, it's still one of the best mine train style racing coasters feelings ever.
And speaking of that mine train feeling, let's take it to Magnum XL200, the first roller coaster in the world to exceed 200 feet in height, creating a whole new genre of coasters with the hypercoaster model. And everybody here knows, well, it's my favorite ride at the park. It's the best ride, and if you don't like it, it's just because you're old. That's all I gotta say about it. At the time of its opening, it was the tallest roller coaster, standing at 205 feet. Cedar Point set the record attendance in 1989, due in part to the introduction of Magnum. As noted by then Park Vice President John Hildebrandt, we all knew we were smart enough to know we had something here. Big Steel made a big difference with Magnum. We started branding ourselves as a big-time roller coaster park. Magnum XL200 held the title of tallest roller coaster in the world until 1994, when the big one opened at Blackpool Pleasure Beach in the United Kingdom, as well as the title of longest drop and fastest speed until surpassed 2 years later by Steel Phantom at Kennywood outside of Pittsburgh. Magnum XL200 continues to rank among the top 25 steel roller coasters. As of 2022, it was still ranked 25th in the world. So there's that, Magnum haters and stands, and yeah, we know it's kind of fallen out over the past few years. A lot of good introductions, but still a top 50 coaster. Get over it.
Not really known nowadays for their thrilling wooden coasters, Cedar Point decided in 1991 it was time to build the world's tallest and fastest wooden coaster. And on May 11, 1991, Cedar Point unveiled Mean Streak to the world, a Ding Corporation wooden coaster opening with a height of 161 feet and reaching speeds of 65 miles per hour, both being good enough for the world record at the time on wooden roller coasters. It operated from 1991 to 2016 before being transformed into another record-breaking coaster at the park that we will get into later. But maintaining a large wooden coaster like Mean Streak was challenging. The ride's roughness and the constant need for repairs led to increasing maintenance costs and downtime. Ironically enough, early on, Mean Streak was known for its smooth ride and impressive speed, providing riders with a fast-paced experience. Towards the end of the ride's life and aging of the ride, the wooden structure led to a rougher ride, which became a common complaint among enthusiasts, wrapping up the era on September 16, 2016 on the iconic coaster at the park. But don't worry, it just got better.
When Raptor was introduced in 1994, it became one of the highlight attractions at Cedar Point. Taking on the midway as riders kicked the sky, and being a bright green color, it was kind of hard to miss. It was a must-ride attraction for the park upon opening. But did you know it opened as the longest and fastest inverted roller coaster in the world? B&M really did a thing here with the snappy transitions and the gray-out helix at the end. This ride delivered not only thrills to the park, but helped them establish a few more records for coaster innovation. And this led to rides we see today like Banshee at Kings Island, who has since all but beaten those records over time. But how about other B&Ms at Cedar Point? Say a stand-up ride, anyone?
Operating from May 11, 1996 until 2014, Mantis, a stand-up coaster at Cedar Point, now known and operating as Rougarou since then, opened as a unique and thrilling coaster for the park, the world's tallest, fastest, and steepest stand-up roller coaster in the world. Now, the age of stand-ups has changed, and a lot of them aged out due to rider complaints about comfort and just not being super fun to ride. But we may see the stand-up models make a comeback with the surf coasters. Time will tell. Rougarou didn't break records when it was converted, and this was done for comfort of the riders. Now operating as a floorless coaster, the legacy of Mantis and the records it once held remain. Also, Rougarou is such a cool name and mythical being. I wish it was used on a more themed and better coaster overall, but love it still.
Just a stone's throw away from the legendary Mantis, now known as Rougarou, sits an iconic, classic, and timeless piece of the Cedar Point skyline. Millennium Forest, designed by Intamin, this coaster reaches heights and speeds unheard of before its debut. Opened on May 13, 2000, it was a groundbreaking ride that set new standards in the amusement park industry. Cedar Point coined the term hypercoaster, so it was only right that they received the first Giga Coaster, and the very first coaster to reach and exceed heights of 300 feet, standing at 310 feet tall, reaching speeds of 93 miles per hour. Millennium Forest was the tallest and fastest full-circuit roller coaster in the world. The ride offers spectacular views of Cedar Point and Lake Erie, consistently ranks among the top steel roller coasters in the world, and has been a Cedar Point icon for nearly 25 years now.
From May 5, 2002 until September 6, 2021, Cedar Point was recognizable with two yellow spikes soaring in the air along the beach, and Wicked Twister was one of the best impulse coasters out there. At the time of opening, coming off the heels of Millennium Forest and a well-known decoy for work that was going on elsewhere in the park, Wicked Twister was the tallest and fastest double-twisting impulse coaster in the world at the time.
But this was all on the heels of what was to come, Top Thrill Dragster. Cedar Point only 3 years earlier broke the coaster height and speed record, but it didn't last long, and Cedar Point was yet again looking for another record breaker. Often referred to as Dick Kinzel's biggest regret, Top Thrill Dragster debuted on May 4th, 2003. This coaster reached heights of 420 feet, speeds of 120 miles per hour, and of course, coined the term Stratocoaster. It was outdone a few years later by King Ka, but despite the years and downtime that passed, Top Thrill Dragster remained an enthusiast must, a wildly popular ride, and one of the world's most recognizable coasters out there. And speaking of Intamin, the park continued to go to the Intamin well and found success with yet another type of coaster model a few years later.
Opened on May 26, 2007, Maverick quickly launched up people's rankings and became a park favorite. Still to this day, one of the wildest rides in the West and one of the most popular attractions at Cedar Point. When it opened, it not only changed the game by not focusing on height records, it became the coaster with the most inversions on an LSM launch coaster at the time.
Now, it didn't actually break any records because, as you know, it didn't actually open with the Heartline roll. It would have had 3 inversions at the time.
But understandable with the trains and those restraints at the time of opening. My gosh, that snappy inversion would have smacked riders' heads all over the place. But the ride still became one of the most popular over time and remains a huge what if with the Heartline roll. But the Twisted Horseshoe roll was debuted on this ride. It won Best Ride for 2007 and has the steepest drop at Cedar Point at 95 degrees. I wonder if they'll ever beat that record at the park or not.
By now we should know Cedar Point usually opens a ride with some sort of record in most cases, or something that makes them unique. On May 11, 2013, Gatekeeper was unveiled to the world as the tallest and fastest wing coaster in the world. It also had the longest drop on any wing coaster at the time too, making this a great addition to the park as you soar through the keyholes over the entrance midway, which we have to say is hard to beat at any entrance in any place anywhere in the world. That is one of the coolest walkways. Fury at Carowinds is pretty cool too, but the keyholes is still really awesome. So Gatekeeper, just great addition to the skyline. Even though it took out our disaster transport, it is what it is. Gatekeeper, another great addition, and held some records at the time.
Which leads us to another B&M at the park, making a dive at Cedar Point in 2016, opening on May 7th, 2016. This coaster boasted a number of records for the dive model. Standing at 223 feet tall, Bel Raven opened as the tallest and fastest dive coaster in the world, and it also happened to be the longest dive coaster at the time too. But beyond that, it had the most inversions on a dive, with 3 unique moments on the ride, flipping riders, and one of my favorite inversions ever coming into the airtime hill at the end. Having since had many records broken, Bel Raven continues to be a standout and popular attraction at Cedar Point. But remember when we were discussing Mean Streak back from 1991?
Steel Vengeance, one of the best roller coasters in the world, came to the Cedar Point Peninsula after the closure of Mean Streak in 2016. Opening on May 5th, 2018, the ride has become a pure certified classic. Upon opening, Steel Vengeance set world records for hybrid coasters, including the tallest, fastest, longest, and it had the most inversions. It also has the most airtime of any roller coaster in the world at 27.2 seconds. I mean, come on guys, everyone loves losing their stomach. Steel Vengeance is the ride for that. Standing at 205 feet tall and dropping riders 90 degrees down, the intense and smooth 74-mile-per-hour journey begins and hardly lets up. Steel Vengeance has won numerous awards and accolades, often being ranked as one of the best roller coasters in the world, and let's be real guys, it's definitely number one.
But the final record, and one we've been eagerly awaiting the return of, is Top Thrill 2 at Cedar Point, debuting on May 4th, 2024, and only operating for a mere week at the park. This coaster, just like the former Top Thrill Dragster, had its records to claim. Featuring the new LSM system in place of the cable launch system, the ride was a fun successor to the original launch, making Top Thrill 2 the tallest and fastest swing launch coaster in the world, with sustained speeds of 120 miles per hour on that final launch. It's hard to beat, and the airtime going over the top hat was unlike before, so we really do hope this ride opens soon. The marquee attractions of the park, just like the supporting cast, held records upon opening and makes Cedar Point one of the greatest coaster destinations in the entire world.
Known for pushing the boundaries on coaster innovation and always striving to break some sorts of records over time, Cedar Point became known as a park for thrill seekers and families alike. I mean, who else remembers the Ride Warriors era? The park was and has always been a destination for roller coasters and fun. With a number of coaster records they hold, it's hard to not find a coaster you love at the park. So the question is, which one of these record-breaking roller coasters was your favorite? Which one do you think had the biggest impact on the park? Make sure you guys leave those comments down below and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already.
A huge shout out goes out to all of our channel members and producers for helping bring all this content, feeding us some ideas, and of course being the best coaster community out there. As always, thank you for being a part of our spooky community and for coaster ghosting with Ghoster Coasters.